So some of you might know that I collect old diabetes collectibles. I have a little museum with antique glucose meters and various diabetes supplies. And I've sent some pictures of them in the past, but I thought it might be fun to take a video of my museum and show you all the things that I've collected so far. My prized possession is this iTone meter here, which is the very first meter that Dr. Bernstein used at home to test his blood glucose levels. He was actually the first person to ever use home blood glucose monitoring, which is amazing. This meter was from the late 1960s, early 70s, and was used in hospitals to rule out the drunks from a person with hypoglycemia. So this meter is very heavy. It's about as large as a book, maybe an old VCR tape, and it plugged into the wall. And Dr. Bernstein actually rated it up to a battery so he could take it with him. So that is the very first blood glucose meter. The first home glucose meter that was released in 1981 was the dextrometer, which I am still trying to get my hands on. I have not been able to find one. So if anyone knows of a dextrometer for sale, I would love to know about it. I usually have a glass case over this, but I thought it'd be nicer to be able to show you these things up close. Over here on the left is the Autolet, which was the lancing device we used when I was a child. You would cock it back and push the button to poke your finger, and we affectionately nicknamed that the guillotine. It was not gentle. It did not have a way to adjust the depth of lancing. So behind that, I have a bottle of Clinitest. Actually, a whole kit for Clinitest, which was the way people tested their urine for glucose prior to blood glucose monitoring. Oh, all my books are falling down. And it had tablets inside it that you would put into a sample of urine, and there would be a boiling effect, and the urine would turn various colors depending on your blood sugar level. And blue meant no sugar, which I actually tested this a while back and I got blue, thankfully. And this is another Clinitest over here. I have a few of them. You can see it was poison, obviously not something someone would want to swallow. In the front, we have some U40 iletin insulin. And I have, this started to fall down. This was a glass syringe that people would have to reuse and boil daily to sterilize and sharpen on a whetstone. So I am really grateful that we have disposable syringes now, which actually leads me to, if I can find it. Oh, right here. Down here was the very first disposable insulin syringe, which I'm sure people were very happy about when those were released. Lower here, I have another bottle of iletin that I believe is a replica. It looks identical, honestly, to the vials I've seen, but the condition is far too nice to be an antique version of iletin, so I'm guessing it's a replica, but it was nice to have. Over here is a Protamine Zinc, which was another older. These are all animal-based insulins. Porcine and bovine were what were used before human insulin. And back here, I have an ACE test, which was a test for ketones in the urine made by Ames. Ames made the first blood glucose meter as well, the dextrometer. And I have some Clinisticks back here, which came out after the Clinitest. The sticks were strips that you could use to test glucose in the urine. So I'm very, very thankful we have blood glucose meter and continuous glucose monitors now. My syringe fell down. And down here we have an automatic injector, which does not look too friendly from what I've seen, and I don't think that was ever too popular. What else? I have down here the very first Accu-Chek BG meter, which came out around the same time as the dextrometer, maybe a little bit later. But that was the first Accu-Chek. And after the dextrometer came the glucometer 2, which I had this meter after the dextrometer personally. I clearly remember this meter. These strips took, I believe, 1 minute and 20 seconds to read your blood sugar, but it was nicer than the dextrose sticks. This used glucose sticks. The dextrose sticks had to be blotted or rinsed with water before you could get a glucose reading and insert into the meter. This was a glucometer 3, which came out after the glucometer 2. I also used this one briefly. I quickly moved on to the Accu-Chek 2, which I very vividly remember around 2nd or 3rd grade. And I have a very nice collectible of that one. This has the meter as well as the chem strips. We have a lancing device, and there's actually an instructional cassette tape on how to use it. That's pretty cool. And then I also have an Accu-Chek 2M, which is a very similar meter to the Accu-Chek 2. And my most recent collectible I just received is a One Touch, the very original One Touch meter. Well, probably most of us are familiar with One Touch, but this was the very first One Touch meter. And you can see we had to lift this little handle and insert a strip here. And you would put the blood on top of that strip, and then it would read. And I actually remember a friend of mine, their dad used a One Touch meter, and I always thought it was so neat. So that's all the meters. And I have a Disatronic pump, insulin pump. I would love to get my hands on the first insulin pump, or the first commercially available insulin pump that people used. But that was the H-Tron. And I know a lot of people love Disatronic, and they were upset when those were pulled from the market. And this is another Autolet. I was able to find 2 of them, so of course I had to buy it. And then the remaining collectibles are books. I have 2 Jocelyn diabetic manuals. And then I have The Diabetic Life by Artie Lawrence, which was, the Lawrence Line Diet was very popular in the UK. And then Lecture on Diabetes. And then back here I have a Clinical Symposia on Diabetes, which was from 1963. And then I also have the Scientific American from 1925, which talked about Banting and Best and the discovery of insulin. And then over here is the meal planning exchange list. And the exchange lists were a meal plan that we used that were based on carbohydrate portions and tuned to your insulin. So today we count our carbs and we dose our insulin based on the carbs. But back then we had to match our food to our insulin dose and when that NPH would peak, when the regular would peak. And if you didn't eat, your blood sugar went low. So we had to map our diet around this insulin. So you were allowed a certain number of exchanges every day. So you'd get your bread exchange and your fruit exchange and your meat exchange, your fat exchange, starch exchange, things like that. And then we had free foods. So that is my museum so far. And let me know if you find a dextrometer.